The British Army is the principal land warfare force of the United Kingdom. A part of the British Armed Forces. As of 2020, the British Army comprises 80,040 regular full-time personnel and 30,020 reserve personnel. The modern British Army traces back to 1707, with an antecedent in the English Army that was created during the Restoration in 1660. The term British Army was adopted in 1707 after the Acts of Union between England and Scotland. Members of the British Army swear allegiance to the monarch as their commander-in-chief. But the Bill of Rights of 1689 requires parliamentary consent for the Crown to maintain a peacetime standing army. Therefore, Parliament approves the army by passing an Armed Forces Act at least once every 5 years. The army is administered by the Ministry of Defence and commanded by the Chief of the General Staff. The British Army, composed primarily of cavalry and infantry, was originally one of two regular forces within the British military. The British Army has seen action in major wars between the world's great powers, including the 7 Years' War, the American Revolutionary War, the Napoleonic Wars, the Crimean War and the First and Second World Wars. Britain's victories in these decisive wars allowed it to influence world events and establish itself as one of the world's leading military and economic powers. Since the end of the Cold War, the British Army has been deployed to a number of conflict zones, often as part of an expeditionary force, a coalition force or part of a United Nations peacekeeping operation. Until the English Civil War, England never had a standing army with professional officers and careerist corporals and sergeants. It relied on militia organized by local officials or private forces mobilized by the nobility, or on hired mercenaries from Europe. From the later Middle Ages until the English Civil War, when a foreign expeditionary force was needed, such as the one that Henry V of England took to France and that fought at the Battle of Agincourt, the army, a professional one, was raised for the duration of the expedition. During the English Civil War, the members of the Long Parliament realized that the use of county militia organized into regional associations from serving as officers in the parliamentary armies. This created a distinction between the civilians in Parliament, who tended to be Presbyterian and conciliatory to the Royalists in nature, and a corps of professional officers, who tended to be independent in theology, to whom they reported. The second action was legislation for the creation of a parliamentary-funded army, commanded by Lord General Thomas Fairfax, which became known as the New Model Army. While this proved to be a war-winning formula, the New Model Army, being organized and politically active, went on to dominate the politics of the interregnum and by 1660 was widely disliked. The New Model Army was paid off and disbanded at the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. For many decades the alleged excesses of the New Model Army under the protectorate of Oliver Cromwell were used as propaganda and the Whig element recoiled from allowing a standing army. The Militia Acts of 1661 and 1662 prevented local authorities from calling up militia and oppressing their own local opponents. Calling up the militia was possible only if the king and local elites agreed to do so. Charles II and his Cavalier supporters favored a new army under royal control, and immediately after the Restoration began working on its establishment. The first English army regiments, including elements of the disbanded New Model Army, were formed between November 1660 and January 1661 and became a standing military force for England. The Royal Scots and Irish armies were financed by the Parliaments of Scotland and Ireland. Parliamentary control was established by the Bill of Rights 1689 and Claim of Right Act 1689. Although the monarch continued to influence aspects of army administration until at least the end of the 19th century. After the Restoration, Charles II pulled together 4 regiments of infantry and cavalry, calling them his guards, at a cost of £122,000 from his general budget. This became the foundation of the permanent English army. By 1685 it had grown to 7,500 soldiers in marching regiments, and 1,400 men permanently stationed in garrisons. A rebellion in 1685 allowed James II to raise the forces to 20,000 men. There were 37,000 in 1678 when England played a role in the closing stage of the Franco-Dutch War. After William and Mary's accession to the throne, England involved itself in the War of the Grand Alliance, primarily to prevent a French invasion, restoring James II. In 1689, William III expanded the army to 74,000, and then to 94,000 in 1694. Parliament was very nervous and reduced the cadre to 7,000 in 1697. Scotland and Ireland had theoretically separate military establishments, but they were unofficially merged with the English for